And welcome, boys and girls, to another episode of Door Stuck, your weekly CSGO show. My name is Bach. I'm your host. Joining me on the show, as is always the case, Mr. Mitch Langford, also known as MagicHelmet, all the way out in what appears to be sunny Chicago today. I see the sun shining in on your face, giving you a nice glow. And as much as I'd love to talk about beautiful days and wonderful weather, unfortunately today's topic is a whole lot more somber, as we are diving into a very dirty sort of storyline that has to do with the history and the past of esports and CSGO specifically. So rather than make nice and talk about all these fun things, we're going to jump right into it. ESO1 Cologne postponed a match yesterday between Chaos and Liquid, which was slated for, I believe, last night at the request of the teams. And this was in large part to join in on the protests that are taking place in U.S. sports, most notably the NBA, where multiple teams boycotted the NBA. And even an analyst during the TNT's NBA segment, the pre-show segment, decided he didn't want to be there. He didn't think that it was appropriate as a former player and as a black man himself to not join in on the protest. So he literally got up on set, unplugged his mic, and walked off, which was probably one of the more incredible things I've seen on live TV in the last couple of years. But just touching upon this real quick, I mean, this feels like it's long overdue that we start to sort of take an inward look at our community and the history we have in regards to racism. Now, obviously, it doesn't necessarily correlate to police brutality so much, but it does illustrate that we have a bit of a dark history when it comes to the past in esports in general and competitive gaming. But it's still there. We like to act like we beat it, like we somehow championed over racism and gaming is inclusive and we welcome all these people. But like that's a load of crap. People who are disenfranchised or come from minority communities, looking specifically at people from certain countries or certain ethnicities, are definitely looked down upon. Women as well. People from the LGBTQ community. We are not an inclusive environment as much as we like to pretend that we are.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been in a public lobby in pretty much any game, there's always going to be, or a lot of the times, there's going to be someone that says something racist, either through the text chat or through the VoIP. It doesn't really matter what game it is, and it's upsetting to see every time I see it. I want to reach through the screen and just punch them in the face. It's like why do you feel the need to say those type of things other than just try to get under somebody's skin? It obviously doesn't have a big effect on me, but I know that there's other people, other minorities that play these games, and that's how they're welcomed into these games. They immediately see a barrage of racism, and that doesn't start, when they're 18 plus, when they might be able to handle a little bit better. These are kids. Let's use Call of Duty for example. They're 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and these people are spamming racist terms at them, and they don't understand why people are saying that to them. Yeah. And, it's been like that for a long time. And, I don't think it's going to go away, but we can certainly take steps to try and mitigate that as much as possible. For example, let's say we go into Twitch, there's moderation tools that can then reduce the amount of those words that can be used. But if you just imagine if we took away those moderation tools, how much racist terms or misogynistic terms would be used in Twitch, because people would spam them if they could. And it's disgusting, to be honest, whenever you see that. So, how can we go about mitigating as many of those terms that can be used and just try to get people to be nice to each other, stop being a dick.
Yeah. I mean, looking at even just this thread as an example, I'm going to scroll down, which is honestly, so this is something that Mitch and I talked about right before the show went live. When we show HLTV articles on the stream for this show, I'm always concerned that I'll accidentally scroll into the comments. And I'm serious, because the comments are always filled with some form of hate, whether it's outright with slurs or hate speech, or it's more xenophobic, or it's suggestive. The forums on HLTV are honestly a cesspool, and it's a great 100%. Indicator of the problem. I mean, this is basically a chat room filled with all the people who go into game and drop racial slurs. There obviously are some good people in the mix, but there is just so much toxicity, xenophobia, racism, and hate towards women and LGBTQ, and it's terrible. There are 730 comments on this article currently. That is, I think, probably about as many as were on the article regarding iBuyPower's ban when they were banned from CS:GO, and you can see the duality of the community when you look at just two of them. So comment 701 says, "Chaos earned my full respect." Immediately following, "Total BS, keep politics out of CS, please. It has nothing to do with politics." Some people say, "Lol, bunch of BS, unprofessional attitude. Chaos should be disqualified. Lamau, what a great sign for virtue signalers." Like, literally, that's the comments over and over and over again, is this idea that somehow it's wrong to care about other people. The very terminology of using a virtue signaler as like an insult, as if to say your level of empathy towards other people is hilarious, so much so that I'm going to make fun of you, is total bullshit. That is not an insult. Being a good person is not an insult. Seeing that other people are struggling or dealing with something that you can't relate to and trying to empathize with that person, that's not a bad thing. That's a positive quality in a person. And the fact that so many people railed on Blast for not severing the Neon partnership because of how bad it dealt with some of the issues going on in the Middle East, such as hate towards the LGBTQ community, pushing out people of a different ethnicity and sometimes murdering them or framing them for crimes in order to get them out of the land. The community railed on them and said, like, "I can't believe it took you so long. Why didn't you make a public statement about this?" The LEC severed that tie instantaneously, and it took you like 16 days. What a bunch of crap. And then right here, there's people saying, like, "Oh, this is stupid. I can't believe I have to wait like 24 hours to watch a CS match.
That I watch for free."
Yeah, that I watch for free, you entitled little shit. So, like, I get really frustrated, as you can tell, just reading through all this stuff and just seeing people, like, not get it. They just don't get it. In fact, I would actually love to pull it up, and maybe I will. There was a guy on Twitter who was arguing back and forth with people about how this doesn't fix the problem and how, oh, what's this really going to do? Great, more awareness. What, people don't have computers or the news anymore? Basically saying, like, this is worthless and it's not going to do anything. And someone said, no, it's about the ties between gaming and racism and how people constantly go into game and you'll hear a racial slur used as an insult. And it doesn't matter whether the recipient is someone who is attacked or targeted by that specific insult. It's not a word that should be in your vocabulary to be used in any form or function. And you're just throwing it out there as your default. Your de facto insult is to use a racial slur. And the guy says, "Oh, so because there's racists in gaming, that means gaming's racist? I guess we shouldn't walk anymore because racists walk." I'm like, dude, you are doing some serious mental gymnastics to try to justify what you're believing right now. The reality is, like, yeah, we have people who are horribly racist in gaming. You could see it in Overwatch. I don't know if you saw this, but a few weeks ago, an open team in Overwatch was banned because their team name was literally racist when you look at the abbreviation. It's called Nice One GG Easy. That's the team name. And you can figure out how they abbreviate it. And then they openly advertised on social media looking for other racists. They said it in the post, looking to recruit 2 racists to join the team of Nice One GG Easy.
Yeah, that's insane, and I'm glad that Overwatch banned them, or at least that's what it sounds like that they're.
Yeah, they did.
It's just like, well, like, why do you do that? And if you're a minority, or even even me, like, where do I go where I can get away from these racial slurs that are being slung in public lobbies? Since it's just consistent across so many different games, like, I feel like there are very few places you can go unless you're just playing within your own friend group. If you're in a public lobby, it's going to be heard probably at least once a day, and it's just disgusting. It's just edgelords thinking they're cool, or people that are actually racist. And there's a very thin line between the two, because they're still using those racist terms if they're trying to be an edgelord. So yeah, it's pretty hard to watch. And as you mentioned, HLTV is really a cesspool for a lot of this, where people think they're cool, posting racial slurs, and just generally being shitty people. And HLTV doesn't do anything about it. And how long has HLTV been around? 15 years, something along those lines. They just got bought out by a large company, made a lot of money, and there's this still going on, literally doing nothing about it. We pull it up today and you can immediately see a bunch of threads that clearly are misogynistic or racist. And, I just can't believe they continue to let that go on. It's insane.
I'm trying to set up here so you guys can see. It's a Gizmodo article. I know it's not always considered the greatest of blogs because it is a Gawker media piece, but looking at Gizmodo, they actually covered the piece that we were talking about. And in there, we'll go ahead and pull it up. It says, looking for FDPS players that are racist around 4.4 to 4.5 SR. No scrims ever. Yeah, the team name was actually Nice One, Good Round. So you can see how they abbreviated it. And the whole article is calling out this race-based hate that takes place in gaming and esports communities, and we just sort of pretend it's not there. Look, if you're working for HLTV, I understand that you guys are trying to improve the site and make it better on a day-to-day basis, and I've seen improvements, but let's be real, it's nowhere near what it needs to be. Looking specifically, and I think we actually even covered this on the show a couple of weeks ago, Frankie made a video about it, about how HLTV is really hard for her to use as a utility for her to do her job because of the amount of hate she gets. And not only just hate, but blatant
just commenting on her looks as opposed to discussing how good of a job she does.
It's not even just her looks, dude. That's the worst part. There's people on the forums who are talking about what certain parts of her body might smell like or might look like.
I saw that.
There's people photoshopping nude images and posting them up of female talent. That's disgusting. How is that still a thing? And people's responses to her video were stop whining. You're so lucky to be a part of this community. Stop complaining. Don't you know there's sport mode? You can disable those comments if you don't want to see them. It's I shouldn't have to go out of my way to prevent myself from seeing disgusting things about myself because you can't stop talking about it.
And a website that I use as a tool to be better at my job.
For work, yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that makes no sense whatsoever.
And it's literally a minefield.
Yeah, and we're starting to make great strides as a society as a whole. The Washington Redskins finally changing their name to the Washington Football Team. A lot of people would say that's long overdue, because people would say, hey, it's not necessarily, it wasn't created with the intention of being a hateful term, but looking back, you can see why maybe that shouldn't be. And they made this switch, thank God. And Dan Snyder realized now that it's something that's overdue. And you'll see that in other teams probably in the near future that kind of dance on that line. You'll see things that happen in stadiums that maybe teams will try to veer away from, like the Atlanta Braves and I think the Kansas City Chiefs both do the tomahawk chop. They'll probably try to omit that. And it's not to say that there aren't teams like the Florida State Seminoles who actually have the blessing of the Seminole tribe to use that name. It's not to say that the name in itself is a problem, but there's just certain things that we do that we don't even realize. Hey, this could hurt somebody else's feelings and could really offend people because it's insensitive towards the struggles that other people have had. One of the things that that really blows my mind, though, in just reading all of this, and we'll go back to the HLTV article too, is just the amount of people who don't get it. Look at this. This is so insane to me that this is this deep of a conversation. I mean, even the Chaos social media manager, who's a big-time memer that goes back and forth. Yeah, she's great. But even she was how do I, what do I do? Because, people are, really going in on this. I don't understand why this is such a difficult thing to grasp.
And I don't understand why people are so upset about it. I have a feeling a lot of these people are bettors and they wanted to get their bets in on this match. But regardless, you got to wait a day to watch this match. Do you really need to be a jerk about this? They're trying to make a stand, make things better for people of color. It's literally a day, maybe two if it gets rescheduled for another one. But you're watching this for free. Stop being a jerk. Leave it alone and just, give them a day. I'm really proud of all the players that, were willing to postpone this match. Chaos for doing it because this is a big matchup for them against Liquid. And obviously they had some sort of communication with Liquid. So props to them as well that they were willing to postpone this to make a stand and let their position be known that they're not okay with what's going on in the US right now because it is insane. I go to CNN or Fox and it's literally just bad news about people of color, whether they're getting shot, they're getting beat up and your protesters getting beat up. And it's just hard to watch. There's no light or nothing positive on any of these websites. And, I'm really glad that, esports teams are willing to do this. I've seen the sports teams do it, which is fantastic. They're not doing the whole shut up and dribble. They're actually going and, making a stand for themselves. And there's a lot on the line when they go and postpone some of these matches or just completely finish the season. There's a lot of money on the line, and, it's a big decision for them to make, but I'm glad they made it.
Here's the funny thing too, right? Like people say, oh, put your money, or don't just put your money where your mouth is. I guess that's like, they're saying like, don't just pay money to charity to make it seem like you care. Actually do something. And then when they do something, they say, shut up and dribble. Like, they still have the audacity to act like action is no longer a valid response. You should just give money now. I don't want you to take action if it affects me negatively, because God forbid I don't have entertainment.
Watch a basketball
game. Oh, that's so scary. What am I going to do with that hour and a half to 2 hours now that I had set aside to sit down and watch a basketball game?
They should spend more time becoming a better person. That's what they should do.
But when we look at this at the same point in time, as much as we want to point out, like, okay, it's kind of crazy that there's this many comments about this, it should seem somewhat obvious. This is the point. There's this many people talking about it. You mentioned, like, oh, how could people not be aware? Well, in case there weren't, now they are. Because there's literally almost 1,000 people on the HLTV forums talking about this back and forth. The one thing that's disheartening is the amount of comments that are likely getting deleted at an almost blistering pace of people who are trying to still throw in hate speech and comments in there that are just obvious, trying to trigger people. The fact that people in our communities think that racial slurs or race baiting people in general is somehow a joke is an illustrator of the problem. Like, in no way is that a joke, regardless of who you're speaking to. The mental gymnastics that people do too, where they're like, well, it's only a racial slur if I use it towards the person. So like, it's only
stop being sensitive.
Yeah, you're a snowflake. Stop being soft. I wasn't calling him the N-word, like, because it doesn't matter because he's not actually black. Like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Be using that word, period.
These words are not supposed to be used. They're forbidden language. There's a reason that they are set aside. There's a reason that going after groups that are hurt by those words is recognized as a hate crime. Like, you have to understand that, yeah, free speech, sure, that's a thing.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah, that's my favorite response to this. Is like, oh, what happened to freedom of speech? I'm not allowed to say whatever I want. Like, that doesn't exist on private platforms. And it also doesn't exist to the fullest extent. You can't go out and say whatever you want because there are certain things that come with consequences. The freedom of speech is that, yeah, you have the freedom to say it. It doesn't mean you have the freedom to say it without consequence. If I go into a Starbucks and I tell the manager that I'm going to shoot him in the face, that's not freedom of speech. They will arrest me for making a threat. Like, you can't just say whatever you want whenever you want. That's not how it works, especially when you're talking about private platforms. Like, people have gone off on social media websites like Facebook and Twitter for censoring. And I know we're getting out way far on this topic, but the reality is, like, you can't just say whatever you want whenever and expect it to be okay. You can't just use whatever words regardless and expect zero consequences. I do have to point a finger, too, for a moment at game developers. Ubisoft, you guys are doing a fantastic job. The way you guys go after people who use hate speech in your game, in Rainbow Six Siege specifically, it's actually pretty unbelievable how quickly people will get banned for comms and text chat that is offensive to people who maybe come from different ethnic backgrounds, females, the LGBTQ. Like, they go in really quick. Within like an hour, I've seen someone get banned for it. Whereas in other games, I have people spamming the N-word and like nothing gets done.
CS.
Yeah, seriously. Counter-Strike.
I've been watching it for 20 years. I've been playing the game for about 20 years, and nothing's really changed. There aren't any, at least to my knowledge, there aren't any forbidden words. And these kids come up with ways where it's obvious they're trying to use a specific word, where they take out like one letter, but it's still clear that they're using that word. It's still going on now. To my knowledge, there aren't any significant filters that stop them from doing it. So one thing I think we need to address is going after the edgelords who think this is funny, under the guise of I'm just trolling. Aha,
yeah,
stop
it's
being
just a
so
joke.
sensitive.
It's just a prank, bro.
Like going directly after the racists, that's a whole nother thing that you got to go after. But first, identifying the edgelords who think it's funny and just try to convince them that like this isn't okay. This makes people feel terrible unwelcome to a community that they'd like to be a part of, I think they might have a little more leeway in trying to convince them to stop using those words. And once you go up to the racist level where people are legitimately racist, that's going to be a tougher conversation. But if we go after the edgelords first, that could be a good start. And plus just adding in filters that prevent people from posting these words, because if I'm a minority and every game I go into and I see that, I don't want to come back. Or I'm going to be really pissed about it, and I'm going to end up saying things in a lot of situations that isn't very nice, and that's not the person I would be. So it's just terrible all around. I just don't understand the want or the need to say those type of things to people you don't know, or even people you do know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll close out the stream with a story. So not many people know about my personal history, but I was raised in a family that was pretty large. I am one of 6 kids, so I'm one of 5 natural, 1 adopted, and then I have 4 foster siblings. My adopted sister and my 4 foster siblings are all black. So I grew up in a mixed home, and I've been surrounded with the ideas that people are people and you should love them regardless. That's how my parents raised me. So when I met my foster siblings, I was running a youth center. That was my first real career. They weren't my foster siblings at the time. They were just kids who came from a home, and I could tell they needed some help. So eventually we worked with family services in our area to get them out of their home, and my parents stepped up huge despite my dad being in his 60s and having only 1 kid in the house at this point. They decided to take 4 kids into their 3-bedroom townhouse because they wanted to keep them all together. That was their goal. So those are the people that raised me. That's why this is an issue for me, and this is why it's something that I feel very passionately about. I remember when my foster brother Petey had a disease called not dissociative identity disorder. He had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is a fatal form of muscular dystrophy that took his life when he was 21 years old. When he was a kid, he could run and play and do all the things, but once he turned 5, he started to lose his ability to walk, and then he needed crutches, and eventually he needed a walker, and then eventually a wheelchair. So by the time I met Petey, he was 11 years old, and Petey was in a fully mechanical chair. He could feed himself, he could take drinks, but he needed help taking care of himself, getting dressed in the morning, using the bathroom, things like that. By the end of Petey's life, he had 7 heart attacks. His body was basically just failing him. That's all that there was to do about it. So when Petey couldn't play sports because that's what he wanted to do, being a young boy, his brothers would be out playing football, and he would watch. That's all he could do, is he could watch them play. So I said, you know what? I don't love this. Let's get him an Xbox. So I pulled some money together with a couple of my friends. We bought him an Xbox and a bunch of games. And I remember once coming over to my parents' house, and he was playing games, and we were just sitting there talking, and he slammed his controller down and rolled away in his wheelchair. And I said, Petey, what's going on? He was crying. And somebody in the game used the N-word. And they weren't even talking to him. And he was 14 at this point. So... And I remember having this deep conversation with Petey where he basically was like, is it why do people have to talk like that? He's like, why does somebody, he's like, he wasn't even he doesn't know that I'm black, and he's not even really trying to go after people like me.
Specifically, yeah.
He's just using it as a default curse word. That's his insult. Instead of calling me a loser or a jerk or an asshole, he calls me that. And he was really upset about it. And it was in those moments that I realized this is the person that could be on the other side. You might not even be trying to intentionally hate against people who are hurt by that word, but you are. You're not even realizing it, because even if in that instance it wasn't PD on the other side, the person who's on the other side now thinks it's okay to use that word. So they're going to use it in the next game and the next game.
Yeah.
And then maybe next time they're in a multiplayer game with 12 different people and they use it, and all those people decide to use it. This is not something that we should continue to support. This is something that we should continue to be aggressive about. A few months ago, playing Valorant in the beta, Prius, Sapphire, and a few other friends, we all got together and we were playing some 5Qs late at night, and we encountered players who started dropping hard racial slurs in chat. Came to be that they were actually semi-pro players who were aspiring to be something, and I'm not necessarily saying that cancel culture is the best thing on earth. We've seen that it can be good and bad at the same time. But I started
cancel those clowns, man.
I found I started posting screenshots. I found their Twitters. I found their Twitch pages. And within a matter of 24 hours, they went from being it's just a prank bro to deleting all of their social media, changing all of their Twitch page names, blocking me as well in an effort to try to brush it under the rug and act like it never happened. And I've actually made it a mission of mine that if those guys ever get signed, I'm going to go straight to the org and tell them. Because I know...
Give them the screenshots.
Yeah, I'll give them the screenshots, and I'll say, this is the same player that you're currently supporting. Because I don't think that in any realm that's okay. And, I think that people like that need to actually make amends and apologize rather than just acting like they can walk away from it.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm glad you shared that story. That just kind of shows how it can really affect people. You really have no idea who's on the other side. Even if you're just doing it as a joke, you're trying to be an edgelord. Like, just be a decent person. You can use like any other word. Hey, you're a jerk. You're a dick. You can say those type of things. You don't have to be hateful, but there's some certain words that you just shouldn't use, man. Like, just avoid those. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see the need to use those specific ones unless you're being an asshole or you're a racist. And either of those, that's not the type of person you should strive to be. It should be welcoming when when you have people coming into a new community. You should be having fun. That's the point of video games. Obviously there's a competitive aspect to it, but that shouldn't lead you down a road where you're saying racial slurs or misogynistic terms. And it's just something that's always been a part of gaming. And it's something I hope that we can really cut down on, because there's really, really no need for it. And yeah, I hope there's some sort of improvement. And I hope this has some sort of impact. These postponement of matches, whether it's sports or esports, or just the conversations that are being had right now, should have a positive impact on it. But, what can we do? What steps can we take to specifically address various ways that these terms are being used and actually make a change that we can see and might even be measurable? Because that would be fantastic if something really, really good comes out of this.
Yeah, I think like we can sum it all up as just love each other. Like, there is no reason to hate each other. Their life is way too short to spend your whole life hating other people, and life will be way easier for you if you don't. It's exhausting to be someone who spends that much of your time trying to hate other people. It really just will not get you anywhere good. Guys, I know it's odd to say thank you for joining us for the show. It is kind of a hot button issue, and I know that some people will appreciate what we're talking about. Some people won't. But if you guys do want to catch us on the show, we're live every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, twitch.tv/NerdStreetGamers. You can find us at the same place on Facebook and YouTube. You can like, follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and you can catch the show every week. It'll be me and Mitch calling the shots, talking about the CSGO world, and hopefully as we continue to march through this discussion that we've talked about, we'll see an improvement in our gaming communities all around us. Guys, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Load it.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah, yeah.